Namaste, Jai Shri Ram. I'm your
Namaste.
Jai Bansal, currently serving as the Vice President of Education with the Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America. This program is organized under the auspices of Stop Hindudvesha, an initiative of my organization, the VHPA. It aims to explore and expose the phenomenon widely known as Hinduphobia in whatever form it exists. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Shri Anil Mehta ji as my guest on this program. He is the author of a book with a very self-descriptive title, The History and Chronology of Ancient India, Undoing Distortions from Colonial Rule. Anil ji, a namaste and a very warm welcome to you on our program.
Thank you, Jaiji. Namaste to you as well. And thank you for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share the message from my book.
Thank you. I'm excitedly looking forward to our conversation. But before we do that, let me just frame the conversation a little bit. And of course, I'll give a little bit of your background very shortly. So before I formally introduce Anil ji, let me just talk about why we are here today. Most people, even in India, do not actually realize the history of ancient India that we studied in schools was not written by Indians themselves. In fact, what we studied is a complete and total distortion of our history. These distortions are no accident. They are the product of deliberate and systematic efforts by colonial powers, particularly since the tail end of the 18th century. Thankfully, over the last few decades, there have been few valiant and serious attempts by our historians to identify and correct these glaring errors. Anil Mehtaji's book is one such attempt. So, Anil Mehta is a chemical engineer with over 30 years of experience in research and design in the chemical industry. But he has been passionate about history since childhood, drawn to uncovering the truth behind distortions in India's ancient chronology. He retired early to dedicate himself fully to historical research. Combining his scientific expertise with first-hand visits to archaeological sites, this book reflects his many years of painstaking work to reveal the true history of ancient India. Anilji's book reads like a thesis. It is based on thorough research and backed by hundreds of references cited in his work. He dives into specific examples of distorted timelines and works to set the record straight, offering a clear, continuous, and connected chronology of India's history from roughly 3100 BCE onwards. So, Anilji, once again, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much.
And I've had the pleasure of reading parts of your book. As I said in my earlier communication with you, it's a heavy read, but it's a thoroughly enjoyable read and very, very informative. So let's start with the title of the book itself. You know, the part of the title is the history and chronology of ancient India. So, can you tell us a little bit about the time frame that you define as ancient India?
Absolutely. So for the timeline itself, it goes back. I start from about 3100 plus BC, 3139 to be exact. So 3139 BC to 1192 AD. So it's roughly about 4300, 4400 years of time frame. That's the part we are talking about. So that's what I mean by ancient India.
Okay, just out of curiosity, why did you pick 3100?
So, and this, so if we go into our original chronology that India had, our chronology, at least what has survived, is from that time frame onwards. So 3139 is the Mahabharata war, and that was a pivotal event. And so our chronology is with reference to Mahabharata war, like so many years from the war, etc. And that's why I picked this. Our Puranas are full of our chronology from that time frame.
Yeah, I sort of suspected that, but I just wanted to clarify, your reasoning for picking that timing.
Yeah, fair question. Yeah,
Yeah,
we do. Our history does go back beyond that also, but we don't have as much data on the chronology before that.
absolutely, absolutely. So, your thesis is that India's history, as promulgated by the European Indologists and colonizers, is fundamentally wrong, and they have actually made deliberately so. So, I think uh, I would like you to, explain in detail the basis of why you say that. I think our audience, including myself, would be extremely interested in the logic and the arguments that you've used and the evidence that you have used to make come to that conclusion.
That's a very fair question, because it's a serious charge. Uh, to understand this, we have to go into how the current narrative of our history came into existence,
Mhm.
when it happened. If and so I would like to use a few slides to explain that. So let me begin sharing my slides. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes, absolutely. It's on the screen, and yeah, it's coming through very clearly. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go to this slide over here. So if we look into our history, how our history came into existence, so I call it the history of our current history. So it starts with the fall of Bengal to the British East India Company in 1757 AD.
Mhm.
So history-wise, nothing much happened, but then the British power over next 20-25 years only consolidated, grew somewhat, and Bengal was firmly under British control. And in 1784, William Jones founded Asiatic Society under the patronage of the East India Company. And if you look into the history of this society, and according to the Britannica, until 1829, only Europeans were allowed as a member of the society.
Mm.
And so the work of the society was pretty closed door. Uh, and I will share with you in the next slides from William Jones' own writing that he dismissed the high antiquity of India's history, which the chronology went back to as far back as 3100 plus BC. So he dismissed that from the very beginning. And the reason for his dismissing of our high antiquity is that, like most Europeans of his time, he staunchly believed in the biblical version of world history. That is, the world started with Adam in 4006 BC, that is roughly about 6,000 years ago. And he believed the Greek chronology, which starts roughly around 600 BC, to be the oldest in the world. And so this was his setup, and so he could not accept India's chronology, which was up to starting from 3100 plus BC, and started tampering with it to bring it into the line with his beliefs. And so this slide shows that what he had, the data he was given, or he had been able to find, that we have the chronology with the various dynasties and kings, in detail, year by year, that this king reigned for so long. So you can see that this is the data that as William Jones was given, and he had it. So it is not like he didn't know, or he wasn't told about our chronology. And this is, I give the reference at the bottom, is the reference here for anybody to look up. This is from the Asiatic Researches, Volume 2, published in 1799. So this is the chronology given, the Brihadrata dynasty, Pradyota dynasty, Shishunaga dynasty, Nanda dynasty, Maurya dynasty, Shunga dynasty, Kanva dynasty, Andhra dynasty, and the Chandrabija last king of the Andhra dynasty. So so starting from 3100 BC and then up to 452 BC. This is what he had, but he could not accept that. So and he started tampering with it. So one of the first thing he did was he changed the starting point of a chronology from 3100 to BC to about 2029 BC. As you can see, these two tables that I'm showing you. These are directly copied from the Asiatic researches. So this is just a photocopy of what William Jones has presented. And he did this in 1788. So this is when the playing with our history begins. Also, just from aside, you can see Abhimanyu and Arjun, son of Arjun. So at least at that point, he is not dismissing this as a myth. Okay, he is taking Arjun as a historical person, Arjun and Abhimanyu both. Okay, and then another point which later again was turned mythical is Vikramaditya, 56 BC. Okay, so just for reference, these are the two which were initially historical, even by colonials, but later on they were turned mythical. Now,
May-
next table. So next table, and this is all, and feel free to ask me in between. Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, Anilji, I was just wondering, the previous table that you showed that started from 3100 BC,
Right.
what is the source of, or are there multiple sources that this is taken from?
So this is the source the William Jones himself has. So this is from William Jones's paper. This is
Oh,
what he had,
okay.
and this also is this chronology is available in many Puranas of ours, and so Vishnu Purana, Matsya Purana, Vayu Purana, Brahmanda Purana. So most of the Puranas contain similar chronology. And but William Jones had a slightly different source. A Pandit from Bengal had given him a Puranarth Prakash or something like that. He quotes in his paper, and so so this is the table that is actually in William Jones's paper. That this is what he understood. Actually, instead of 3100, the data is starting from 3138, but this is what he understood or his information. So
Right.
what I'm showing is that this is the information he had.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah,
clarifying.
absolutely. Yeah. So what he had, and then from that information, he he at least cuts out the 1,000 years from the chronologies to get in to begin with. Okay, and now I'll further explain why he's doing that now. So on the right hand side is another table of his, and this table also is from the same paper, and this table prepared in 1788. You see the year from, so it is slightly, I don't know if it's you are able to read this well or not. It's the letters are a little bit small, but I'll walk you through the table. So the first column says Christian and Muslim, and so here Adam, Noah, Deluge, Nimrod, Bali, etc. here. Okay. Then the middle column is the Hindu, and this is the title of this table is a chronological table according to one of the uh,
Hypotheses.
hypothesis. I have a little bit of reading issue here in the preceding tract. My cursor. Okay. So Christian Musulman first column, then second column is Hindu, and here he is Manu 1, Manu 2, Hiranyakasipu, Balip, and then Rama over here, etc. Pradyota Buddha, and then down here somewhere Vikramaditya, etc. Now the last column, very important column. This is the year from 1788, year that is backwards. Okay, so that means 5794 years before 1788 AD, which when you do the arithmetic, it is 4006 BC.
Right. Right.
Okay, so 4006 BC is this is his view. World began in 4006 BC with Adam, and then you have Noah, and then you have the deluge in 4138 years before, which is 2350 BC. Okay, so according to this, his view, this chronology, of 3100 BC was simply impossible, and the world would not have started, before 2000 BC, because 2350 the floods had taken place, and then few hundred years had to pass before the world is repopulated, etc. So you see this. So he was trying to fit our chronology into this time frame. So Rama got brought down to somewhere maybe 3800. So that's what, about roughly 2000 BC. Yeah. And then you can see, then comes Buddha, and that Buddha he puts down to 1000 right here, just a 1000 BC. Okay. And then we have the Vikramaditya in 56 BC. So you see, this is I mean, there is no doubt that he was completely, trying to fit the India's chronology with in the Christian time frame, that which could not be earlier than 2000 BC for the world to be, actual
Yeah.
to be populated and to be governed.
Very interesting analogy. So basically, what you're saying is he took the start of the world directly from Bible, and he said that's when Adam existed, and therefore that's when Manu must have existed because they were the original, human beings on Earth, and they just sort of connected those two as the starting point for humanity, and
Hmm.
everything else seems to fall in line. Now, what is interesting to me is that in this view, uh, the uh, the time of Buddha, is still about 1100 BC, which
Good observation there. Yes, and then
very different from the now sort of the current narrative, which is more like 500 BC.
yes, 563 to 483 BC. So, yes, we will go see how. So, this is just the beginning of tempering of our history, and then we will see how that tempering continued for next 100 years till
Yeah,
the end, till the end of 1800s.
absolutely. I mean, you use same observation with Vikramaditya. Now Vikramaditya is what, 300 some AD.
One
Uh,
that is, and that's the wrong Vikramaditya. Actually, in fact, the original Vikramaditya, that is, he is acknowledging that Vikramaditya is erased from history. The
I
Vikramaditya that we are told, that is actually Chandragupta, two
Yeah.
of the Gupta dynasty, who had an additional title called Vikramaditya.
Right, right, right. Okay, back to you. So, sorry for the interruption.
No, no, no problem at all. Let's. I think it's good to have it interactive. Uh, so that makes it more meaningful. Now, so with that as the background, okay, so this is why I think I answered your question, and then we can go into more detail. But so this is how was the background. Why, this is why I say that the history, you know uh, given by the colonials, written by the colonials, is fundamentally wrong, because the basis itself is fundamentally wrong.
Hmm.
Nobody now believes that the world is 4,000, 6,000 years old only.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, do you want to describe this, or should we go a little bit more into
So,
you
uh,
here?
yes, I can hear you, and so I can maybe go a little bit into this. That is now. So, with that time frame set, uh, what a major decision was made by the colonials, and again it was proposed initially by William Jones, that one of the strong belief they had, that India's history had to be connected to Greek history, which is only about 600 BC, goes back to 600 BC, and that is, it had to be, if India's history did not match up to Greek history, then okay, it's not valid. So they had that strong belief of establishing the contemporaneity of
Hmm.
India's history. Basically, India's history should be validated by Greek history. So this
Yeah.
essentially left no room for India's history older than Greek history to be valid. So
Okay.
a major identification. So The basis of this was that Sandrakotas is mentioned as a king ruling in India at the time of Alexander's invasion of India. So that is the Megasthenes, who was not just Megasthenes, even the Alexander's time. They they were there are descriptions by the ancient Greek writers, historians, that the king called Sandrakotas ruled in India. Now, this Sandrakotas is all that is said by the Greeks. So, William Jones proposed that this Sandrakotas sounds similar to Chandragupta, so it's Chandragupta. Now, then a major mistake that was made is that this Sandrakotas should have been Chandragupta of the Gupta dynasty, the Chandragupta one of the Gupta dynasty, but instead he proposed that this Sandrakotas is Chandragupta Maurya. So
Mhm.
we Chandragupta Maurya ruled in 1534 BC, whereas Alexander's invasion was in 326 BC. So now they brought Chandragupta Maurya to 326 BC by establishing, making him as the Sandrakotas or defining him as the Sandrakotas. And this is how we lost 1200 years of our history. And then they made this the basis, the sheet anchor. So once this basis was established, then everything in our history before Chandragupta and after Chandragupta were all redated with reference to Chandragupta Maurya of 326 BC. So that is, for example, Gautam Buddha, he preceded Chandragupta Maurya by say 300 years, okay? So it would have been 1800 BC, but now Gautam Buddha comes to 500 plus BC. So you see, this is how from uh, we went to 1000 BC, now we come to 563 BC. It's because of this relative placement of the historical uh,
Absolutely.
the kings. And same way, Ashoka and all the other dynasties also then similarly had to be, the dynasties that followed Maurya dynasties, such as the Shunga and Kanva and Andhra dynasties. All those dynasties also had to be shortened to make them fit into this. Not only that, the history of Kashmir and Nepal also had to be, fitted into this. So this is, you can see, so the 1200 years of our history just got erased because of this wrong identification. So in my book, I call this a monumental blunder, monumental misidentification,
Yeah, monumental blunder
or misidentification.
or deliberate attempt to distort our history just to fit their biblical narrative.
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, so whether it's when you read chapter 2 in my book, you will see that uh, there were arguments. Even some of those colonials had doubts whether this identification is correct or not, but some of them decided to ignore those doubts and just proceeded. So it's you know. Partly there whether the lack of knowledge, or it's or maybe it just they were so firm in their belief, so it can go both ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I have two side questions here on this page. Um, as you know, Ashoka, the grandson of Chandragupta Maurya, left a lot of archaeological evidence around the world, around the country, right? Uh,
Correct.
from north to south, east to west, a lot of his writings. I'm wondering if if there was any information on the era these were written in. That's so in other words, is there any sort of time reference in these his famous pillars edicts? That's question one. And you think about that. And second question is, there is very extensive Buddhist literature that has been written in Pali particularly, by various sources. And I'm just wondering if there is any reference to the timeline of Buddha's era in these in the Buddhist literature that one could anchor off of.
Okay, sure. So let me answer your first question, whether is there any time mentioned in Ashoka's inscription all around India. So the time that is mentioned in Ashoka's inscription is with reference to the the years of his own reign. So, like in the 8th year of his reign, or in the 12th year of his reign, that's how those inscriptions are written. So they don't mention another time frame.
I see. So it's all relative to his own era. Okay.
Right. Then the second question is the lot of Buddhist literature. So there is again a time reference there with reference to Buddha. So for example, Ashoka, during Ashoka's time, several Buddhist councils were held, sort of big meetings, big gatherings. And again, so they all, or even Ashoka's coronation is mentioned as, like, for example, it happened 214 years after, say, Buddha's time. Actually,
Okay.
we find that even that time itself is also erroneous. The difference between Ashoka's coronation and Buddha's time is more like 300 years. Okay, 300
Hmm.
plus years. But so these are the kind of information we have. So it's on a relative basis, not in absolute terms.
I see. Very, very unfortunate. And of course, he sent ambassadors, Ashok, that is, he sent ambassadors. I think his younger brother or his son, I
Or
believe,
his own son and daughter. Yeah, yeah.
to Sri Lanka and a number of South Asian countries. I'm wondering if we know of any historical evidence from these countries at all.
So we don't have a reliable historical or especially chronological information from, at least to my knowledge. And what happens is that the uh, information from India would be the first hand. The information, then it takes even times, in centuries sometimes, for the information to flow out from India. Now Sri Lanka is much closer, but say for information to flow out from to China, and so then that information becomes a second-hand information, and so much time has passed. But again, yes, we do have some information, and so I have used some of that information, and my predecessors have used some of that information to at least make arguments that Buddha's time is much earlier than what we are told right now. So, for example, there is some Chinese information available. There is also and that it takes Buddha to at least 1000 BC, if not older than that. So we have some second-hand information available.
Okay, so we're struggling with trying to rectify history that happened 2000, 3000, 4000 years ago, as you um, and so that raises what I call the elephant in the room question, uh, and that is many people would say, well, this is something that happened such a long time ago. Why are we so exercised about it today? So what if historians made some mistakes along the way about something that happened, long, long time ago? How does it matter in the modern context? How
Yeah,
would you, yeah, how would you answer that?
fair question. So there are a number of aspects that this impacts us from number of aspects. First of all, is that if you look at this, uh, we have lost thousands of years of our history is one. In some cases, our history is off by maybe 600 years, 700 years. In many cases, our history is off by 1200 to 1400 years. And then what happens is that, so it is not only just a timeline is off, but also the history that, corresponding to those years has been erased. For example, when you shrink a timeline, let's take Gautam Buddha's timeline of 1800 BC. When you bring him down from 1800 BC to 500 BC, so the 1300 of years of history is erased.
Sure.
Another issue that is the history preceding that also has been erased. It is completely turned into mythology. So that way, what we end up is we have lost thousands of years of our history because our current, if you look at the current academic world, India's first historical person is around 600 BC, Gautam Buddha and Mahavir Swami, and so before that, there are nobody else is dated officially, at least to precede 600 BC. So that means we are left wondering. I mean, on the other hand, we have archaeological evidence from many sites now. Initially, it was Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, but now many sites, and that India had a very well developed civilization back to 3100 BC, 3200 BC. So what happened between 3200 BC to 600 BC? Why is there, it's complete vacuum right now in the academic world. And then in that we had this Aryan invasion theory inserted. Aryans came into 1500 BC. So that's a byproduct of this, because the history has been shrunk from 3200 BC to 600 BC. Chronology, I mean, not just history, because history is even beyond 3200 BC. So that's 2600 BC has been taken away, and then Aryan invasion theory brought in there.
Sure.
Now, then let me give another example. What it does is that some of the greatest people have been erased from history. One is Vikramaditya. We just talked briefly about that. Because our history got shrunk, so some people just have, there's no room for, you take 1200 years out of history, so there is no room for many of those people, great people, kings. So Vikramaditya, who established the Vikram Samvat in 57 BC, he was one of the greatest ever kings of India, emperor of India. He is placed, at least legends wise, he is placed only next to Sri Ram and Sri Krishna. That was his greatness. He ruled for a long time. But there is no room for him in this compressed history, so he is completely erased from our history right now. He and his grandson Salivahan, who established another era, the Shalivansaka, and Shalivansaka is India's national calendar. And Vikram Samvat before that, is half of the, North India uses that. We are still using that, and his calendar is continuing. So, and Vikramaditya also had Navaratna in his cabinet, Kalidasa, Vara, Meera, and all these great people there. So all those, so they also have been brought down in history, and our history has been made so much discontinuous, because he is completely erased from our history. You take another, I give you another example of what happens is, take example of Shankaracharya, Adi Shankara.
Sure.
His real time is 500 BC. Now he has been put in 800 AD. So number of angles to look at. One is that now he comes after Jesus and Muhammad in
Yeah.
800 AD. That's one. Whereas, so one of the arguments sometimes you will hear is that, Adi Shankara, he established the one God. I mean, that is also not a fact. Our Vedas, from our Vedas time, we have the one God, one Almighty principle. But anyway, so that argument gets made. Another is that if you look at Shankaracharya's history, 500 BC, you might have heard of the debate, the famous debate Shankaracharya had with Mandan Mishra.
Mishra, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now you look at that, Mandan Mishra was a disciple of Kumaril Bhatta.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Kumaril Bhatta is connected with Mahavir Swami. So we have this chain in our history that Mahavir Swami to Kumaril Bhatta, because Kumaril Bhatta was Mahavir Swami's disciple, and then Kumaril Bhatta's disciple is Mandan Mishra, and Shankaracharya had a debate. So we have this, so a true history matches up with this timeline. Then you look at Shankaracharya connects us with so many, other histories. So Shankaracharya is also mentioned in Kashmir history. So Kashmiri king called Gopaditya, he established a Shankaracharya's temple. So
Yeah.
now when you look at Gopaditya's timeline, that also matches up with Shankaracharya's timeline, that a few hundred years, a couple hundred years after Shankaracharya, Gopaditya ruled. Okay. Then we also have Magad history, that the certain king called King Hala was the contemporary of Shankaracharya, as written by one of Shankaracharya's disciple or immediate disciple. So that also connects us there. Then you look at Nepal, Rajvamshavali. They also they also mention Shankaracharya because he visited Nepal. So
Mm.
when you take Shankaracharya and put him 1300 years later, it breaks up this is our history completely, makes it all discontinuous and distorts and creates so much confusion. So it is not just a matter of the timeline being a few some time off, but it just totally messes up our history.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it also leaves little room for Sri Ram to exist and Krishna to exist, um,
Oh,
and
absolutely. So, yeah, that's I didn't mention that, but yeah, essentially those Ram and Sri Krishna have been turned from historical to mythical now.
absolutely.
And
So
our
that
chronic and our genealogy, we have so much extensive genealogy given in Puranas, all that gets invalidated. So
exactly.
you can see the damage this does to our history.
Yeah, and not only that, it gives the gives weight to creating sort of calling them mythical personalities as opposed to real people who lived and did these great works.
And then another damage it causes is that with this misplaced timeline, it doesn't match with the timeline given in our Puranas, and then they blame that Indians were not good in documenting history. It is the other way that Indians were very good, actually excellent. In fact, the amount of historical information available in India far surpasses any civilization that we know of. With
Yeah. Yeah, so Anilji, actually, you sort of answered my next question, which is this narrative that has been spread about Indians that they were very bad at writing, recording and preserving their historical records. Obviously, I think your argument is that there's no truth to that. As a matter of fact, our history is very rich. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on some of the Puranic history where the dynasty after dynasty is mentioned in both the Itihasas as well as in various Puranas.
yes, so I will. Yeah, I will do that. So let me. Uh, so this is okay. Before I go there, I thought I came across this slide, so I'll share this. So this is that I mentioned briefly. See, this is the dynasty of Magadha. Magadha, by the way, Magadha was the first piece. That was the one that was tempered, and then after that, everything else was tempered. But you can see it's a comparison, and I also. But then I'll go into the amount of genealogical information we have is so much. It's like it's amazing, unbelievable amount of genealogical information we have. So I have this four appendices in my book, and I can give only so much information in the book. But so the first appendix we have is the genealogy of the Chandra dynasty. And by the way, I don't translate Chandra into moon and Surya into solar. We don't translate, my take is that we don't translate names. Okay. For example, my name is Anil, and we're not going to look at the translation of Anil in English. Okay, something like that. So I stay away from that. So Chandra dynasty, and this is a very important. So we had two major dynasties in India, Chandra and solar. Sorry, Surya. Uh,
Yeah.
so when you look at the Chandra dynasty, so we have at number seven, this is Yayati, and he had five sons, Yadu, Turvasu, Druhyu, Puru, and Anu. Okay, so now just to give you, and so this dynasty goes up to Kuru. We have the Kuru Vamsh, right? And
Yeah.
then and then my chapter on Mahabharata, then I go from further from Kuru onwards. But over here now, Yadu. So Sri Krishna is a descendant of this Yadu dynasty 50 generations later. And I have that dynasty, I have that genealogy also given in chapter 6 on Sri Krishna's historicity. Now,
Yeah.
Puru. the rest of this dynasty, this line that we have up to Kuru and then Pandavas, that is all a descendant of Puru.
Hmm, 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 hmm.
Then we have Turvasu. This is what is referred to as Turusk people, and it even could be lining up to Turkish people. That is the Turvasu.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. And so we have this line going. So we have this genealogy up to Kuru, and then we have another branch that takes us to Draupadi, Drupad, King Drupad.
Hmm,
We
hmm.
have yet another branch. We have yet another branch. This takes us to uh, the eastern states like Banga, Kalinga, Anga. So I'll show you that as well. So here is Kuru. Then from Kuru we have two branches. So from Kuru we have Hastinapur. From Hastinapur we end up with Dhritarashtra as Shantanu, and then his son, and then his grandson Dhritarashtra and Pandu, and then we have the second branch from Kuru that ends up in Chedi and Magadha kings, and then in Magadha kings we have then Jarasandha, no. So these
Hmm.
are all historical figures. So can you imagine somebody just making up this so much?
Yeah, it's Anilji. I've in my reading of Ramayana and Mahabharata, I come across these. I mean, they recite a very detailed genealogy of Sri Ram, Dashrath back and Dilip and so on and so forth backwards. And you say to yourself, my goodness, there's tremendous amount of information contained in these things, and it's so frustrating when they say, these are all mythological made up stories. It's for any Hindu, it's a matter of just embarrassment when you hear something like that. But thank you for clearing it up. You have anything more to discuss here, or shall we go to the next subject?
Yeah, I can go on and on, but so yeah, there's as far as genealogical, we have genealogy information. We have tremendous. So Appendix 4 in my book goes into Sri Rama's genealogy, and interesting piece I would like to share that starting from Ikshvaku, Sri Rama is at the 65th generation,
Hmm,
and then after that, his 96th generation from Ikshvaku is the contemporary of Mahabharata war. So that gives you idea. We have 96 generations before the Mahabharata war. So take that is at least 2000 years, if not more. So
sure.
Mahabharata war is 3000, plus BC. You add another 2000 years there. That's 5000 plus BC easily there. So that gives you an idea how old is our history.
Right.
And
Right.
then another important piece of interesting piece of information is that Gautam Buddha comes from that same line of
Yes.
Ikshvaku dynasty, which I was just fascinated by learning that.
Yeah, I was not aware of that, but that's a fascinating piece of information. So your book, I think, makes a very serious accusation, which is that not only did they tamper with our history, they actually tampered with it deliberately, not just to kind of it's not an honest intellectual mistake. People can make mistakes. Scientists make mistakes. You're a chemical engineer. I'm a chemical engineer. I know we made, goodness knows, we made mistakes. In our careers. And history is a relatively soft science, if you like, and so mistakes are likely to happen. But I think your point is that these are not just mistakes; these are deliberate attempts, and they have actually specifically overwritten some of our data just willy-nilly, without any rhyme or reason, simply to fit their narrative and time frame. Can you just share some examples of that with
So
us?
yes, I pulled up my slide over the slide that is, shows how. So first of all, you know current we all have been sort of brainwashed that our Puranas are not historical. They don't contain history. It's all just made up stories. But
Hmm.
Colonials themselves used Puranas to rewrite our history. What they did was that they cherry picked information from the Puranas. They, in fact, even used the same dynasties and sequence and the same kings, but sometimes deleted a few kings here and there. And in one case, they deleted the entire dynasty and just kept a few kings. But if they had not used Puranas, then why would they try to edit the Puranas? So here an example. Here's an example that this shows the original verse in the Puranas and compares it with the altered verse in the Purana. And this was done by it's available in the book published by Frederick Perjaiter. The book title is Purana Text of the Dynasties of the Kali Age with introductions and notes. So this is in a transliterated in a transliteration, and then here is the actual original verse here for those who can read Devanagari. This is the verse that
Mhm.
in the without going into the meaning of it, it essentially says that in the time of the 27th Andhra king, the Saptarshi will be back in the same constellation. So that's the gist of the verse. So 2700 years of cycle is what is being described here. So what Prajaita did was that so he changed some of the words. So here Saptasestada Pramshuhu instead of so here Pratipe Ragni. So instead of Pradipte, he changes to Pratipe. Now let's look at who is Pratipa. Pratipa is the Shantanu's father. So if you know Shantanu, Shantanu was grandfather of Pandu and Dhritarashtra, and Pratipa was Shantanu's father. So whereas original verse says that this is covers the timeline from Parikshit's time to the 77th Andhra king. But instead of now, by changing this to Pratipe, he is extending this backwards by four more generations. So that is
Mm.
essential, including four more generations, is essentially shortening the time frame. So this is, you can see this is, and there are many such examples. Another example is that Puranas clearly say that between the Mahabharata war and Nanda's coronation, Mahapadmananda, there were 1500 years had passed. Okay, as a round number, actual number is 1506.
Mm.
But so many Puranas state that number. Even currently also Vishnu Purana gives that number. But what Parjaita and others did that they picked one version of some tempered Purana, edited Purana, which said 1015 instead of 1500, and used that information. Although even many other copies that he had said 1500. So this gives you that they always wanted to pick the shortest time period possible, and then proceeded to edit the Puranas to justify that.
Yeah, so clear evidence of, and this is not the only shlok. I've read your, I tried to read through your book, and there are many examples like that given.
I
Uh,
like to go ahead. Sorry, yeah.
please go ahead.
Yeah, I also like to share this information. Like so, we talked about Sandra Cortes. How he was misidentified. So that information came from Indica.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
obviously, William Jones and the Colonials had read Indica because otherwise they would not know. They would not have learned of Sandra Cortes. So now the
Yes.
same text also mentions the same text from Megasthenes. By the way, we have only fragments of Indica, not the entire text. But so the same text mentions that 6,451 years and 3 months had passed from the days of Father Bacchus to Alexander the Great. This is talking about India, and so many and 154 kings had reigned in India during this 6,451 years and 3 months. Now, my argument here is that keeping track of this kind of number of years over 6 millennia is possible only when there is a calendar. It's impossible otherwise to just someone just keep counting. So what
yeah.
that means is that our calendar in India began at least in so 6451, and this is in 326 BC. So you add up 326 to 6451, so that takes us to 6777 BC. So India had to have a calendar at least starting in 6777 BC. And this number we also come across from another angle. Alexander Cunningham, another colonial Indologist, he has written a book on India, ancient India's calendars, and there he makes an argument that looks like the Saptarishi calendar started in 6777 BC. So that's
So it's triangulating very nicely with some
right,
different pieces of
right.
information.
So this information was ignored by colonials.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, this is a clear case of intellectual dishonesty just to keep the theologians happy. Uh, yeah. So let's talk briefly about some of the work that has been done by our historians. Uh, who try to call out and rectify some of these misdeeds. So just kind of acknowledge. Let's mention some names and acknowledge their good work, if you wouldn't mind, Anilji.
Absolutely, no, that is that I must do that because I'm standing or sitting on their shoulders. If it wasn't for their great work, we wouldn't be here talking about this and knowing what had happened. So let me come to that. So many, number of them, but at least the four names I definitely like to mention. These are like the giants of our true history. So the first one is Narayan Sastri. He published a book, The Age of Shankara, after extensive research on the timeline of Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya, published it in 1916. Tragedy is that he had planned to publish much more, but he passed away at a relatively young age of 50 or so. Okay.
Mm,
So that was a great loss. He even had an extensive library, and according to his son, who published his second edition, I could not even find Narayan Shastri's first edition of his book. So in the second edition of his book, his son says that there was no trace of his library or what happened. So number two now, Krishnamacharya. So he was friend of Narayan Shastri, and Krishnamacharya has published an extensive volume called History of Classical Sanskrit Literature back in 1937. And that's that's a very important source of information that I have used. And then the most voluminous work and voluminous research, 4 decades of research was done. 4 decades of his life was spent by Pandit Kota Venkatachalam. In
mm,
1950s, he published 9 books in English and many more in Telugu. And I have quoted his work extensively. So if it wasn't for him, probably I wouldn't be here talking about all this work. And then KD Setna. So relatively recent, meaning 35 years ago or so, he he published a book, and this is the book that helped me answer because I was not able to find an answer to the implication of the bilingual inscription near Kandahar.
mm,
That is the only bilingual inscription we know. The one inscription is in Brahmi script, I think, or Aramaic, and the second inscription is in Greek. And that is the argument that if the inscription, that was the argument made by colonials, that if the inscription is in Greek, okay, then obviously that is Alexander's time, about Greek time, or a little bit after that. But
mm,
Setsuna made after he did a lot of analysis and said that, hey, these inscriptions are on the same rock, but doesn't mean they are from the same time. And I'll give you an example for that. there's an Allahabad pillar.
Yes.
Allahabad pillar contains inscription of Ashoka, then it contains the inscription of Samudragupta, who came more than 1200 years after him. And then it also contains the inscription from Mughal kings.
Yeah.
So, so that's a valid argument that just because it's on the same rock doesn't mean, you have to look at the style of inscription and all other salient features of the inscription. So this was a very important contribution by Sri Setna. Um, and then I have also used lot of work published since this time. So these are the people whom, because of whom, we are able to reconstruct our true history, or at least closer to the true history. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so Anilji, I mean, I think these people deserve a lot more recognition and respect than they have gotten in our in our education. It is so sad that most of us, and that includes me, have not heard, let alone know about their work. So it is very sad that in the last 50, 60, 70 years, our education system has not been true to its roots and brought out the great work by our great historians and thought leaders. But thank you for highlighting some of these luminaries in this space. Um, a couple of questions. I'm very mindful of the time that we have. We've been here for about an hour, but let's just very briefly answer a couple of questions, then we can wrap it up.
Sure.
Um, so one question is, just bringing ourselves into modern times, and it's sort of maybe a double-header question in a way, but perhaps the same question. A number of people. Some are very, in fact, live very close to you. Dr. Raj Vedam is a good friend of mine. He's been on my platform a couple of times. He's doing a lot of good work in sort of similar area. He identifies very much issues, the kind of issues that you're talking about. Then we have Nilesh Ok. He's another Vedi Arya. I think you have mentioned in our conversation.
Yeah.
And this fellow, in University of Toronto, Rajaram Mohan Roy. They're all working to sort of identify the mistakes that have been made in our historical narrative by others, and trying to bring it to our our consciousness today. So I guess there are two questions that arise, in that. One is, have you tried to compare your timeline and your arguments and conclusions with some of their works? I know you won't, converge exactly, but I'm just wondering if there are any major, discrepancies that you're aware of. So that's
So,
that's one question. Let me just ask my second question because it might be related. Now the science of cosmology is, as very well developed. We have, computer models that you can use to age, to identify the age of certain events or certain, you know, cosmological events that have been mentioned in our, Puranas and Itihasas. And these people that I mentioned are using some of those tools. So I'm just wondering if they are helping to close the loop on this very important issue of our history. So on to you.
okay, yeah, fair question, and certainly yes. So I'm aware of at least Nilesh Ok and Raj Vedam, and recently became aware of Raja Ram Mohan's work. So let's talk one by one. So yes, even in my book also, I'm aware of the dating using the astronomical positions, computer modeling, astronomical positions. Even in my book also, I have given that information as well, concerning dating of the Mahabharata war done by about, at least I have given the dates from four, four or so different people, and all those they so one is the latest one is Saroj Bala. She has published a book recently on astronomy dating based on astronomical positions. Then also there's Narhari Achar some years ago, and before that Raghavan. So in my book I have this mentioned the dating of the Mahabharata war, and it's all their conclusions were have been around 3100, close to the what the timeline given by Puranas. In fact, Saroj Bala brings it precisely at 3139 BC or just 3138 BC or something like that. Uh, so that I'm aware of Nilesh Oak's work, and so now he's basing his work completely on the astronomical positions, and he has a significantly different timeline for Mahabharata war. I think he dates it at 5561 BC as opposed to 3139 BC that Puranas tell us, and also some other astronomical models tell us. So there's a significant difference on that. So let's talk about that, and then I'll talk about Raj Vedam and Raja Ramon also. Uh, so one is that Nilesh Okji's work is based on the astronomical positions only to my knowledge. Uh,
Mhm.
Now, and for singular events like either the Mahabharata war or the Ramayana's time, okay, Sri Rama's time, okay, we also need to have a valid history. We also need to fill in the space in between also. So in my book, and which is based on the work of Sri Pandit Kota Venkatachalam and Narayan Sastri and Krishnamacharya, all this, it gives a continuous history starting from the Mahabharata war onwards. Okay, I mean each single year is accounted for. I have 43 tables in my book, so that gives you complete at given year who was ruling either in Hastinapur or in Magad or in Ujjain. So that's one information. Also, Purana, our calendars, our Kali Yuga calendar. So that aligns with the 3139 BC because the Kali Yuga, current Kali Yuga calendar, which is a living calendar by the way, is the current year is 5126, and then Mahabharata war happened 36 years before that according to Puranas and Mahabharata text itself, and so all that brings us to 3139 BC. So we have, then there's an inscription also. There's an inscription in Karnataka at Aihole. According to that, also the Mahabharata war happened, in around that time frame. So this way, so in my book, I'm looking at all this, information, and not just from one source, and we cannot afford to ignore what's given in our Puranas because that's the, that is Puranas are what contain the history, and that's where we learn all these dynasties and the kings. Okay, so so I have a major that way I this discrepancy, or I'd say disagreement, with Sri Nilesh Ogji's conclusion. Also, another point I bring there is that the so different astronomical modeling are giving us two different answers. So first of all, that need to be resolved, and I am not an expert on astronomical modeling. In fact, I am not even a student of it. So all I can do is just simply get the information of somebody else there. Let me now talk about Raj Vedam. So Raj Vedam, I think he's less about chronology, but he's more on the how the knowledge from India has flowed to the world outside, and also he's done some, looked at some archaeological sites. So I think we that way we complement each other. I think. Uh,
Mhm.
so we both benefit. I mean, so his work is as important as the chronology work. And now, well, last is that I'll talk about this Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and thanks to you, that's how I came to know of him. His work is probably the closest to what my book is. So, which is the chronology, and trying to get the exact true chronology. And but here then we have a significant difference after some agreement at some point that that is and that arises that his difference arises because I mentioned that bilingual inscription in Kandahar,
Hmm.
which I said that that was a problem that I had faced too. But then, based on Sri Shetna's work, I got convinced that okay, these are from two vastly different time frames, but apparently Sri Raja Ram Mohan Roy is not convinced of that, and so that's why he ends up with still a shortened time frame, and then he identifies Ashoka. I think he identifies Kumar Gupta of Gupta dynasty as Ashoka, which for which I think we don't have Puranic corroborate. Puranas don't corroborate that, and so we have significant difference on that aspect. But nevertheless, we all are trying to get to the true history. So all this work is very important.
Absolutely, Anilji, and once again, I compliment you on the tremendous service you've done to the Hindu, civilization and ecosystem by spending. I don't know how many years it took you to write this book and do the research, but it's a tremendous piece of work, and I compliment you on completing it. It's really a compendium of great deal of research. Thank you. um, there is and of course it is not unexpected and unusual for different researchers to come up with slightly different conclusions because each one is making certain different set of assumptions about the data, and that is not unusual in modern science, or history is, as I said, a very soft science in that respect. Even in hard sciences, you find discrepancies of that kind. um, this is a story that is, I think, unfolding and will continue to unfold for time to come, as long as we find dedicated people like yourself and others in this space who are willing to, spend good deal of their lifetime to work on these things. Um, the Saraswati Sindhu civilization and all the evidence from there is yet to unfold. The script is out there, and there are a lot of people working on that. I hope in my lifetime I get to hear some interesting bits of that, and one can only wonder what that might reveal to us about our history, if anything. So yeah, there is a lot going on. There are also archaeological sites being found, in new sites being found in India, and I'm just, we're living in interesting and exciting times, and I think, I'm just envious of our next generation who are probably going to be much more knowledgeable about things that we're only, just starting to get a sample of. So on that note, before I close, I'll just give you the last word. If you want to say something to close out your conversation, and then we can stop the this session.
So, Jai, first of all, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to share with you and through you with a much larger audience of what I have learned. And it is very important that that so many people are working on this, and so that we all are trying to come to find out the truth. And so yes, all this work is very very important, and so we are so that we can really ultimately we hope to come to some final conclusion in a much our history get our history in a much better shape. So I hope that a lot more people hear about not just my work but everybody else's work, and ultimately that history that is actually taught world over maybe gets closer to the truth. So
Hmm. Well, that's a fond hope, Anilji. I'm not holding my breath for that, to be very honest, because the Western narrative that they have created for for our history is also tied to their own identity. And as Raj Vedam would say, the Aryan invasion theory and all the other things that we so much, I mean, hate, if you like, is really tail that's wagging the big dog, which is actually the European identity and history. So I don't know where that is going, but at least we will have tools to talk about our own history. Uh, whether we are able to convince others is we'll leave it to the future, I guess.
That is well said. Yeah, at least we can, at least our history, that we have control of, our history. Okay, whether others want to adopt it or not, that's up to them.
That's up to them and their own self-interest and so on and so forth. But once again, thank you, NLG, and very enlightening conversation. And I look forward to future conversations of this kind. I think we are sort of co-travelers in some respects in this space, and I'm thankful that our paths crossed, and hopefully, we continue to carry on this dialogue further.
And yeah, and so I just like to add for the audience, I think most people know about, probably a lot of people know about it, but so you are a fellow traveler and so you published a book. And and I really found it quite, it's very informative. So again, thank you for sharing that your book with me. And
My,
so
my, my pleasure. Thank you so much. And namaste. Uh,
namaste. Thank you.